Okay, awesome. I'm sorry for that. Now, I kind of want to know, I know we have people from all over the world, which is so awesome. So how many people here are actually from New York? All right. I'm actually a native New Yorker. I grew up in Staten Island. I'm not sure if I'm proud of that, but I already told you guys. All right, so I want to get started. First of all, my name is Sonam. You could present it like when your fingers get cold, I'm so numb. I am a senior iOS engineer at Us2. Us2 is the company that made Monument Valley. Who here knows about Monument Valley? Awesome. So Us2 has 4 different studios, one in Sweden, London, Australia, and New York. The game studio, which is where Monument Valley was made, is based in London. I am based in New York. I work on more client work and like our own internal experiments. So we do apps, websites, VR, and AR work in the New York studio. It's a really great place. I love it. I won't rant about it. I just wanted to let everyone know that's my background. OK, so today's game plan. Well, first, I'm going to go over just the context in which, like, why I'm here and what we're going to talk about. Then I'm going to talk about some patterns, VIPER, and then show you everyone here an implementation of the design pattern itself. So first, I guess really first is like, why should anyone even care about what I'm talking about? I guess I'll tell everyone a story. About a year ago, I was at a bar just hanging out with some of my coworkers, and I met a Google iOS engineer. Really cool dude, really smart. I was fascinated, intimidated, and just like grounded by his thoughts and his work. And he started telling me about this design pattern, and it's called VIPER. And he's like, yo, Sonam. I'm like, what's up? He's like, have you heard of this pattern called VIPER? And I had worked with MVVM and RX Swift put together, MVC, but I hadn't worked with VIPER. So when he asked me that, and when he said it with his passion, I was like, kind of scared to say, no, I don't know what that is. But I said, like, I haven't heard of it. So that was about a year ago. And then finally, in the past 2-3 months, I've had a little bit of spare time at work to work on an internal experiment in which we are making a framework based out of the VIPER architecture. So how many people here are actually using VIPER in a production-ready app? Wow, OK, that's awesome. So more people than I expected, which is really, really good. Thumbs up to all you guys. But for the most part, from a lot of the people I've talked to, it's not commonly used, but it is becoming more often talked about. So that's why I want to talk about it here today. If anything, you will leave just understanding a little bit about the VIPER design pattern, hopefully a lot more than you already know. So that is the goal of my talk. By the end of this 22-minute left period, you will have a better understanding of VIPER. If you don't, then shame on me, but hopefully that snake is kind of appealing to you and you remember it. All right. So let's begin. Some of the patterns we use are here behind me. MVVM, people like, I like it. MVC, people hate it. I think it's all right. It's not the best. And then VIPER, which kind of leaves a lot of people either intimidated, confused, or just scared of the unknown. Because to be honest, and at least in my mind, it is quite different than the other design patterns that iOS developers commonly use. So what does this actually stand for? Well, it's right there behind me. So view, interactor, presenter, entity, and router. VIPER was created by a few folks over at Mutual Mobile, which is an agency based out of Austin, Texas. They came up with a design pattern kind of building off of the clean architecture, Uncle Bob's clean architecture. They used it, and then they kind of published it, and it became more common, and people started talking about it. The thing is with VIPER, all the blog posts that you read online or all the sample code, it's all slightly different, which is OK. It's just that there's no exact standard for VIPER. So this is the standard, very beautiful diagram of VIPER that I made. So I'm not sure if it's beautiful. I was kind of making a joke. But I think really what I need right now is 5 volunteers, really quickly. 5 volunteers can come up to the stage. like really fast, because I have 20 minutes. So just 5 people. I got 1, 2, 3, 2 more. You'll be off the stage within 30 seconds. Awesome. And if everyone can just take a sheet, so that's view, interactor, and just stand next to each other. You want to be presenter? Awesome. There you go. That's the spirit. All right, there we go. Entity. And then I need one more, please. Thank you, thank you. And then this is the router. If you could go, let's see, view come this way over here. Interactor next to the view. So, yep, if you could stand over here, please. And then, yes, you be last, please, router. There you go. All right, can we get a round of applause for all these young folks over here? OK, so VIPER is module-based, meaning whenever you build your application, you want to think about a user story and build a module around it. So let's think about one. Let's say control a video. You're going to play video in your application. You need to play, pause, and scrub the video. Now, I'm going to make a module around those actions. Now, it's going to be broken up into these objects. So you got your view, interactor, presenter, entity, and router. Notice how they all end in protocols, except for the entity and router. Those are just ponzos, plain old NS objects, or an entity could be an enum, however you see fit. Just remember, whenever you are making a VIPER module, your interactor will be the one interacting with your entities and your data managers. Your entities should not be core data objects. They should just be as simple as possible. Maybe an enum or a very simple object to represent the data that you need for that user story. Everything is a protocol in VIPER. Oh, no. Everything is a protocol and is protocol-based. Now, when you're building VIPER with a framework, which is what I'm going to go over today, the router doesn't really make sense. A router is an object in charge of navigating your application logic. So think about it as holding your navigation controller and holding all the flows that will exist through your app. So pushing one view controller to another view controller. Personally, I don't think it's necessary. I don't really like it. So I'm sorry, router, if you can please step down. I like you, though. You're great. Thank you. The other thing that's the most important part about VIPER, at least in my eyes, is the inputs and outputs. It's all about actions. When I tap something on the view will then talk to the presenter. The presenter will then talk to the interactor, and it then travels downstream and then comes back upstream. So really, I kind of want to focus on the input and outputs of these relationships. So the first one, let's say an Interactor Output protocol. That's something that we'll go over more in depth soon. You would think that this applies to the interactor, but actually, it goes to the presenter. So the presenter will be conforming to this protocol, and it's called the Interactor Output. And what it's going to be doing is when a view sends a message to the presenter then outputs that to the interactor. So this is a naming convention that's been set in place, like an Interactor Output protocol. You can change the name to make it clearer, but I just want to demonstrate that the presenter is in charge of outputting information to the interactor. And then the Interactor Input protocol is, in fact, attached to the interactor. And the interactor will talk to any data managers you have. So maybe an API service, maybe a data store. I don't have any person representing that here, but that's essentially what the interactor and who the interactor will talk to. So this is just a simple little representation of what's above. I wanted to isolate out the inputs and outputs and the protocols that you must conform to in order for the framework to work or the module to work. So that's it for this part of the presentation. Thank you again. Seriously. Round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. So again, when you're building VIPER in a framework, so meaning like I built a module and I want other developers to use it in their code, I kind of took away the idea of a router because I want the application and the developers who are in charge of the application to be responsible for the navigation logic. What I do like and what I've introduced is the idea of a builder and then also the idea of a contract. You'll see this around in some VIPER articles as well, that you can create a contract. A contract in your VIPER module will essentially define all the protocols that are used within your module. I love it. Why? Because it's a go-to place for any developer to understand what's happening in your entire module and what is needed to satisfy a user story. The builder. So the builder is what will build your module. Think of it as a configurator. In my example, I have the view controller essentially asking the builder to build the VIPER module and return back whatever it is that you're asking for. All right? OK, cool. I just talked about a lot of diagrams, and I brought people up here, but it's just abstraction. Abstraction's fun, but it's not that fun until you implement it. So like I said before, let's take an example, which is a user story called control a video. Just play, pause, and scrub a video, for example. That could be the acceptance criteria of your user story. So when you're looking at video playback, there's so many things that are happening. I mean, it's a lot. And when you're a user, you don't even think about it that much. But when you're a developer, you're like, oh, shit, this is a lot. Oh, sorry, I don't know if I could curse. But, all right, so there is a sample framework that I've built at us too. A few of us have been working on. It's an experiment, so if anyone wants to follow along in code, I don't know if people have their laptops. You can, you cannot. You can check it out later. You can start it later if you want. But it is called the Video Playback Kit. It's public. It's open source. I'm going to just bring it up right now. So just one second. So the purpose of the Video Playback Kit was really just to test VIPER as an architecture, and also test it with something that we thought was important and slightly complex, which is video playback. Video playback has to deal with state, so player state, UI updates, and then data synchronization. So we thought, maybe this could be a good candidate. Can we create a VIPER module around playing a video? All right, so I will just show you what kind of a demo of the framework. It's a little laggy on here, so just apologies in advance. So it plays a video. That's great. You could scrub through it. Like I said, it's a little laggy on the simulator. And then you could also drop in videos in a feed and play them here. So that's pretty much the purpose of the framework. You could add in a video view, play, pause, scrub, and control it, whether it be in a single view or in a feed. So let's jump into code. OK. So I'm going to start with the builder. You can see there's a lot of code right there. But there is a function right here that just says build view in cell. Now, this is essentially what your view controller would call. So if we look at it over here, where a view controller is trying to just add a view to the view controller, it's one line, and it just says build view and for a video type. There is an entity called video type, and it's very, very simple. It's the simplest form of a video type that we can have. And I will show you it right now. So right here, this enum, you can see that it has two cases. You can play a remote video or a local video. And all it does is strip out the URL name or the local image name. That's really all you need, right, to play a video. I don't really need the metadata. I don't need to know the title. All that stuff, that's up to you as the developer to put on the UI. But now, the next most important thing, and the thing with like all the meat in a VIPER module, is the contract. So you can create a protocol kind of outlining it as the use case, so all the use cases that your VIPER module will support. Some people create interactors around each use case. So let's say scrub a video. if you want, while you're building your VIPER module, you can create an interactor that is literally called Scrub Video Interactor. I don't know if this is how some people do it at their jobs. Does anyone do it this way? People who are working on it in production, do you create separate interactors for every use case? Anyone here? No. OK. So I find that overkill. I find it to be like that's when your files can grow extremely fast. So I like to create, instead I just have one interactor for the whole user story. So in my case, it's controlling playback. So I have a playback interactor. I found that efficient and useful. You don't have to do it that way, but that's just one form of using the VIPER pattern. So now you'll see here, there's the view protocol. So like I said, everything is based on protocols. Your view protocol will define everything that your view actually needs. But the most important thing, and one of the most confusing things, I think, with VIPER is the dependency relationships. So you have a presenter that your view is attached to, but then your presenter is also attached to the view. So it's a little confusing. And I can demonstrate that confusion here. So right here, when you set up all the dependencies, and I think when you're creating a VIPER module, this is something that you have to pay a little extra attention to, is that each object, so each person that was standing on stage up here, they all have to connect to each other, which can lead to retain cycles. So you have to be a little careful and make sure you're making your variables weak when it's necessary. Sorry, I want to be like, does anyone have questions? But I'm supposed to wait till after. That's what I was told. I recommend, if you're building your VIPER module, to be doing this dependency setup either in your builder or create a separate protocol that is specifically for setting up the dependencies. It's really easy to overlook one of these things. And as soon as you miss one dependency, the whole stream can break. So that's just a call out. And then another thing that, if we're just going to go back to the contract, I'm going to go down the contract, but I'm going to try to keep it as interesting as possible. I think the next thing that's most important is the presenter. The presenter in the VIPER architecture is supposed to just format the UI. It should not import UIKit at all. So it shouldn't know really about anything UIKit related, but it should set up the view for everything the view needs. So in this case, you'll see that the only thing the view really needs to know is like a theme, and that's really about it. And then you'll notice it has all these functions that's specifically called out as view to presenter. These are callbacks that the view will actually tell the presenter about. So when I tap the video view, I tap play, that information goes right back to the presenter. The presenter doesn't really need to do anything with that. OK, someone tapped play on the view, that's great. But now the presenter needs to tell the interactor. And that's the next step in that journey. So if we look at the interactor, I'm just going to go into that class. You'll see here there's a did tap video call. This is coming from the presenter itself. And then now the interactor will then go ahead and actually tell either your data manager. In my case, I have a playback manager. So when I think about that, that's the downstream kind of flow. When you have an action that happens on the view, and then it's really the presenter's job to ultimately tell the interactor. But then the real meat and the real action doesn't really happen until the interactor goes and tells a data manager or an API service. So that's stream one. So action up and coming all the way down to your data store, your API service, whatever it might be. So what are the pros of this? Because I could tell already on people's faces that either you're confused. Well, I could tell that it's getting confusing, because this is the part where people start thinking that VIPER is overkill. Because at MVVM, you don't have to go through all these different pieces to get to one place. And yeah, it does sound like overkill. But the great thing is that each of your objects are really just doing one thing. And so when it comes time to test each of these classes, it's basically a lot easier to test than it would be with MVVM or MVC. Because you can tell that every method here, every function, is doing literally one thing. And in some cases, it's just passing information along. And then now let's travel back upstream, because that's pretty much the next part of this whole flow. Is when let's say I tap a video, and then the video is basically loading the data, and then the data is ready for the view to actually play the video itself. What happens is your API service or your player manager will tell the interactor, and I'm just going to show you that here. So right here on video load success, you can see that that's actually coming from a playback delegate. So the interactor here is directly talking to the presenter and telling the presenter, hey, now you are ready to do something with this state. But the presenter has no idea about the interactor's relationship with the manager. So the great thing is that even though you have your interactor, presenter, and your view, and your entity, the presenter and the view have absolutely no idea about the entity itself or the API service. They are literally just separated out there doing their own thing, which makes it really great because you can reuse them in other ways that might suit your needs, because they are not fully dependent on the entity at all. So it can make them really flexible and really powerful later on. So once the interactor tells the presenter about this video layer, the presenter will then go ahead and send that upstream to the view itself. So one thing, the next thing I'm going to just show is what I was talking about, which is really confusing, is this is the presenter. You'll notice the presenter is conforming to this output protocol, the Interactor Output protocol. Because the presenter gets that information from the interactor, right? Like I just showed you. The interactor said to the presenter, here's some data. So what happens is when the presenter gets it, think of it as the presenter is actually acting as the output. It is like kind of that funnel. And you'll see all it does is on that start, it reloads either the interface or it formats some data for the interface itself. So you'll notice this pattern really commonly within the VIPER modules and the VIPER pattern. It's all about using inputs and output protocols and then transferring data upstream or downstream. So I'm just going to, sorry, one second. So I'm going to summarize really quickly what we just talked about. Why and when should you use VIPER? So first let me start with why. Why? Because it's protocol-oriented. Literally, the entire thing is consisted of protocols, which means that you can create your own version of any module as long as you conform to the protocols laid out in the contract. It's testable. It's easier to test, much easier to test than MVC, and it is easier to test than MVVM. It adheres to the single responsibility principle, and this obviously I think everyone knows. Everyone talks about the single responsibility principle, and when you actually put it in place, it makes your code much cleaner. And lastly, it's reusable. But when should you use this? Because it's a lot of pieces that I just talked about. Well, one, there's tools that generate files for you. There are tools on the internet that will literally generate an entire VIPER module, all the boilerplate code for you. I do not recommend using those tools. Unless you've used VIPER 100 times in your life, I just do not think it's a good thing to use a tool to generate all the files for you. It's good to make it yourself. You're always going to modify it a little bit, and that's OK. Also, if you are super agile, if your team iterates every day or has releases every week, I don't know, and I don't think VIPER is the best pattern for you. If you're working on a reusable component that you know the features and you know the acceptance criteria for, and you know it'll be reused a bunch of times within your application, I recommend VIPER. If you're working on an application that has very strict features and everything is laid out way before you start implementing, VIPER is a good way to go. You have to remember, though, it's not the most common design pattern in the iOS developer world. So if you plan on handing out your code, sharing it with other team members, or maybe you work in an agency and you have to hand off your code to another team within a couple of months or a year, it might not be the best because not every iOS developer is aware of VIPER. It's not the one that's that's commonly taught first. Usually MVC and MVVM are the first two design patterns that iOS developers are going for. So I would just be careful and be aware of those kind of restrictions. I still think VIPER is really great and it's really powerful. It's just you have to be a little bit careful in terms of who's going to be working on it and then how much time do you have realistically to work on either your module or your application. So that's it for VIPER. If anyone wants that code I just showed, that repo is public on the us2 GitHub. So anyone can check it out. If you're interested in VIPER, you can also find me in the office area for questions. And that's it. I'm at 0. Thank you, everyone.